Hey, what's up guys, how's it going? So today's gonna be a bit of a different video. I know typically I do console versus consoles, but today I'm doing generations versus generations, specifically the 5th and 6th generation. Now to be honest, I have a lot to say about it, but what we're gonna be doing here is we're gonna be talking about each generation on its own. We're basically gonna talk about the consoles and talk about the generation overall. And when it comes to the Dreamcast, it's gonna get its own little segment, because I consider it a little bit of both generations. The Dreamcast is confusing. It's gonna get its own segment nonetheless. Now, before we get started, I would like everybody's thoughts on this. I'm thinking about starting a series where I'll talk about each generation of gaming. You know, obviously I'll give my thoughts based off of research. Obviously I wasn't around to experience it. And I'm thinking I could do something similar to this, or just talk about each generation sort of, you know, in detail. The Magnavox Odyssey, the this and the that. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Now, enough of my bullshit. Oh, actually, one more thing before we get started. I just got the Sega Saturn recently, so I'm not going to be as clear and conclusive with the Sega Saturn. I've only got the console and 2 games for it, so obviously I don't know much about it quite yet. So when it comes to the Sega Saturn segment, I'm going to be kind of loosey-goosey with it. I'm just going to know my stuff based off of research. But like I said, enough of my bullshit. Let's just get started.
Why did Mom give you the silver? I was supposed to get the silver.
Where were you when Mom was sick?
Oh, that's right. You were in Florida with that
Don't talk to my wife that way.
Talk any way I want to.
Excuse me.
You know, you're not even
I've got to say, I think I want to be a Democrat.
Okay, time out. Fangs and claws away. Peace on earth, goodwill to each other. Where's the love? You can't stop, Grandma. You can't.
PlayStation.
The PlayStation 1, one of the greatest consoles out there. Now, when it comes to the 5th generation, the PS1 did a lot. It went from being a part of Nintendo to being its own brand. But of course, we all know about the stuff, you know, the Nintendo, PlayStation, and the Super Nintendo. We already know about that. Let's just talk about the PS1 on its own. So as we all know, the PlayStation 1 came out in 1994. Now this must have been huge, because the main consoles at the time were still the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. And I'd imagine having 3D graphics midway through the 90s must have been awesome. And just the amount of games that the PS1 had must have been amazing. I mean, of course, we already know the top ones. Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, the top-down Grand Theft Autos, the Tony Hawk games, Tomb Raider, Rayman. I could go on all day about the top PS1 game. And in a way, it sort of invented, you know, 3D control, obviously the DualShock controller. The PS1 kind of did a lot. When it comes to this generation, it sort of set the standard, I guess. And let's not also forget that the PS1 was targeted towards adults and teenagers at the time. No, it wasn't meant to be just an average game system. Of course, it had, you know, Spyro and Crash Bandicoot for the kids and shit, but there was a lot of, you know, mature stuff. Again, Twisted Metal, the original Grand Theft Auto 2, Tony Hawk. This is meant for that, I guess, edgy 90s teenager type, or adults. I don't know, but the PS1 just wasn't meant to be an average game system. The PS1 sort of broke the mold that video games are for kids thing. It sort of broke that. Now, one more thing that I would like to mention about the PS1 is that a lot of game companies sort of got their start here. Of course, you know, Rockstar Games, the people that made Croc, Squaresoft or Square Enix, however you know them by. A lot of big game companies and franchises got their start here. And to be honest, I find that sort of interesting. I mean, think about it. You know, we're playing Final Fantasy games today. Just think about where they were when the PS1 came out, or when the NES was out. Take GTA 5, for example. Everybody playing GTA 5 today, nobody mentions the original PS1 games. Anyway, enough ranting. My apologies. Now, one small issue I would like to mention about the PS1 was quantity over quality. You see, the PS1 had a lot of heavy hitters, like I just said before, but the PS1 also had a lot of shitty games, like Bubsy 3D or Virtual Sea Monkeys. The PS1 has its fair share of bad games. And again, with the PS1, it's quantity over quality. Like, sure, there was a lot of heavy hitter games, but there was also a lot of bad games. But for the most part, I'd say that's the PS1's only bad flaw. It is just bad games. But of course, with its flaws, the PS1 is a great system nonetheless. It was innovative, it set the standard. You've all heard this before, the PS1 is just overall a great system. And it did a lot for this generation. Now I guess, on to the next console.
Is Jason here?
Jason around?
Is
Jason have?
If you win the Kellogg's Nintendo 64 sweepstakes, you better get ready for a party.
Jason!
Because you might win one of over 1 million prizes, like a new Nintendo 64, or even the grand prize, a block party for you and 64 of your friends. See, specially marked Kellogg cereals are right for a free game piece. Many will play, only 1 in 64 will win.
1996. Now, this was the year that the Nintendo 64 came out, and believe it or not, this was a semi-big system. Not as big as the PS1, but still big nonetheless. And believe it or not, the system also set some standards for the later generations, of course, with Rumble. Obviously, it didn't come with it. It was like a expansion type thing that came with like Star Fox 64 or whatever, but we're going off the rails. It set some standards for the future as well. And I just want to start off with this. Where the PS1 fails, the N64 succeeds. Like I said before, the PS1, it's quantity over quality. With the N64, it's the opposite. I'd say the majority of the N64's library is great games. Of course, you got some bad ones here and there, but, you know, every system has its bad games. Of course, the N64 has one huge flaw. Cartridges. So you can't hold as much storage as you can in a disc, but it's simplified. I'd imagine it was easier to make games for the N64 rather than the PS1. But again, another flaw is the N64 didn't have demo discs, although it did have VHS tapes.
We got a lot of new games coming out. Star Fox 64. Test pilot boy.
You want to know about Star Fox 64, eh?
Yeah, and you'd better tell us all you know. Or else.
Or else what? Or else plumber boy here gets
What are you guys doing with Mario? No!
Leave Mario out of this.
Funny VHS tapes at that. But anyway, and one other thing, looking at it from the outside, the N64 kind of seemed like a kiddie system when it first came out. I mean, of course, you got Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Zelda, Banjo-Kazooie. You know, the N64 just seems like a kiddie system, just looking at it from the outside and based on, research. Obviously, I wasn't there when the system released, but it just kind of has that, like, kiddie vibe to it. And it didn't really have too many, mature games. Of course, it had a few. It had South Park, Conker's Bad Fur Day, of course, the Tony Hawk games, Biohazard. The N64 had its fair share of mature games, but they're few and far between. However, I will say this, all of the games on the N64 are good nonetheless. They may be a little bit kiddie, I'll give you that, but they're still good. I absolutely love Mario Kart 64. For an example, I love all the games on the N64, even though they're a little bit kiddie. So the N64 definitely has its flaws, but it's still good nonetheless. But of course, how can we talk about the N64 without talking about this monstrosity, the controller? Now look, a lot of people say that this is a bad controller, but me personally, I disagree. See, with this controller, you have options. You have many ways to play this. Of course, you could do the good old regular way. You could just hold the joystick and hold the main buttons, or you could do, just a regular 2D style. You could hold the D-pad and hold the buttons. There's a lot of way to play the N64, and I kind of like that. It gives you options. But of course, with most game controllers, you just get 2 handles and that's it. And I mean, to be honest, well that's good. I still kind of like weird and quirky controllers like the N64 controller or hell, the Duke controller. I made a whole fucking video about that. If you want to, check it out. Link will be in the description. But I feel like the N64 controller gets unfairly hated. Granted, I understand it, but it doesn't deserve this much hate. Now, let me explain to why the controller is sort of shaped like this. Let's not forget, this is the mid to late 90s where 3D games were just coming out. People thought, how are we going to control these 3D games? See, the PS1 kept it kind of simple. There were no joysticks. It was just a D-pad and X, square, circle, and triangle. With this, it was a little bit different. Anyway, though, the N64 was a good system nonetheless. Again, it had its ups and downs, but it was still a great system. Now, sure, while its library was small, that library is packed full of great games. And this is just my opinion, but I feel like the GameCube era and the Nintendo 64 era was the best era of Nintendo. And that sounds weird to say, but for me, it is. I feel like after the GameCube, Nintendo went kind of corporate, but that's a whole video on its own. The N64 is a great system. On to the next console.
There's never been a game like Sega Saturn's Knights.
Never been a game that's allowed you to fly, fluid and free, in real-time 3D. Never, not anywhere. But especially not on that other system. Simply because, with only one processor, it doesn't have the power to do it. Fly, plaything, fly. You're not ready.
The Sega Saturn, the most underrated system of this generation. Now, like I said before in the intro, I'm gonna be a bit loose with this segment because I just got the Sega Saturn recently and only have like 2 games for it, so I can't really speak on the system. I only, speak on research and stuff like that. But the Sega Saturn is incredibly underrated, and honestly, I don't understand. Well, I do, but this was one of Sega's, I'd say, weirdest systems. I mean, of course, there's a lot involved in the making of the Sega Saturn. And to be honest, this deserves its own video, so I'm just gonna keep the segment short and sweet. But yeah, the Sega Saturn was Sega's really first 3D system. And one thing that's incredibly weird about the Sega Saturn is it didn't have a Sonic game. Obviously, the Sega Master System had a Sonic game. Of course, the Sega Genesis had a Sonic game. It's weird that this one didn't. For the first 3D system, it didn't have a Sonic game. It had Nights into Dreams, which is still a good game, but it's not Sonic. There wasn't really a 3D Sonic game until the Dreamcast, I believe. I mean, there's Sonic Jam, but that's a whole nother story. Anyway, I'm sorry if this segment was a bit rambly. Again, I know a little bit about the Dreamcast, just not a lot. I need to play it a lot more. I need to really get to know the system, I guess. Either way, let's move on to the next segment. Alright, so the 5th generation. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the best generations. This generation sort of introduced 3D gaming. And in my opinion, this generation has just peak creativity. I mean, think about it. Again, top series came from this generation. Grand Theft Auto, Tony Hawk, Final Fantasy VII. Pokemon was introduced in this generation. Like, I'd say mid to late 90s was the best time for this generation. And again, this generation sort of pushed 3D gaming into the mainstream. Of course, 2D gaming was always still there. I mean, the Sega Saturn supported the hell out of 2D gaming. A little bit with the N64. Of course, you got Yoshi's Island and a few others. But I'd say for the most part, this generation really is about just introducing 3D gaming. Now, the generation that I'm going to get ready to talk about perfected it. This generation is peak creativity. And in my opinion, I feel like the consoles of this generation have a lot of personality, attached. GameCube, you think of the purple lunchbox, a cute little startup. It's cool. OG Xbox, you got this big black thing. When you start it up, it sounds like you're starting up a nuclear reactor. You set up the PS2 and it sounds like fucking angels are yelling at you. Now, I know this is gonna be weird to say, and I'll just be honest. I have a little bit of bias towards this generation since I grew up with it, but I feel like this was peak time for gaming. Great games, great creativity. Online gaming wasn't quite a thing yet. Of course, it was on the OG Xbox and the PS2. The GameCube, it was a bit of a different story. That's a separate video, but online gaming was just getting started with this generation. But anyway, enough bullshit. Let's just get started.
Nothing comes between a man and his game. 4 can play with Wavebird wireless controller, new for Nintendo GameCube.
The Nintendo GameCube. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the underrated systems of this generation. Now, kind of seems like, just based on research, that the GameCube was going for more like an edgy vibe, as edgy as Nintendo could get. I mean, there's tons of horror games on the GameCube, a ton of weird games. Like, it seems like Nintendo was just trying to get away from that kiddie vibe that the Nintendo 64 had. Honestly, in a way, it sort of worked. No, hey, I'm speaking about it from a kid's aspect since I grew up with it. But in my opinion, playing the GameCube, when it was relevant, was kind of cool. Granted, it wasn't as edgy as the PS2 or the OG Xbox, but it was still somewhat up there. I mean, just look at Shadow the Hedgehog.
Damn it! We only got 1 more minute before all the bombs go off!
Damn, we've been detected. Where's that damn 4th Chaos Emerald? Damn you.
Now, I know this is going to be weird to say, but getting away with a damn on the GameCube seemed like a lot. Again, I know that's weird, but I don't know, it hit different back in the day, I guess. Anyway, though, unfortunately, the GameCube didn't really sell a lot because, well, instead of doing cartridges, they had mini discs. And to be honest, Nintendo's always been weird like this, ever since the NES days. And granted, they had to be weird during the NES days in order to, sell it. Made it look like a VCR so they could sell it. They didn't want to call it a video game system, that's why they called it an entertainment system. You know what? I made a video on this. Check it out. Link will be in the description. Nintendo's always been weird, but this seems kind of different. I mean, during the 5th generation, they did cartridges, now they're doing mini discs. Nintendo's always been doing something weird. Now, this could either be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you think about it. It could be good because, it's the Wii, motion gaming, or it could be bad, just like the Virtual Boy. It all just depends, I guess. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we're going off the rails. Back to the GameCube. It's a lot of weird games around the GameCube. Like I said before, Go-Go, Hyper Grind, Cubivore, a lot of weird games landed on the GameCube. And honestly, I think this is what gives the GameCube its personality. When you think of the GameCube again, you think of the little cute startup, the cute lunchbox look, and the weird-ass games. Now, because the GameCube was underrated back in the day, it's now super rare and valuable. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for going off the rails a lot in this segment. On to the next console.
Hey! Ratchet and Clank going commando! Vacation's over! You've been selected for the PlayStation 2 Greatest Hits Collection! You're a classic, and now you're back in action for only $29.99! Jak 2! Based on your performance, you've been chosen to be a PlayStation 2 Greatest Hits title for just $29.99! We made them great, you made them greatest hits!
The PlayStation 2. Now, when most people think about this generation, this is the first console that they think of. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because the PS2 is just an overall great system. Tons and tons of great games, but it's very similar to the PS1. Quantity over quality. Again, Grand Theft Auto series, Klonoa, the Jak and Dax, a ton of great games to the PS2, but there's also some bad ones. Now, one reason the PS2 was so popular back in the early 2000s is because it had the ability to play DVDs. Now, a lot of people don't know how important this was. A lot of people don't know how big DVDs were in the early 2000s. You don't know how big portable DVD players were. Because the PS2 could play DVDs, this console sold, I think, like 2 million units. And again, I always try to mention this when I talk about the PS2, but some people didn't even use the PS2 as a game system. Some people just used it as a DVD player. I know that is extremely weird, but yeah, the only reason why the PS2 was so popular is because it played DVDs. But enough about that bullshit. Now, the PS2 on its own is still incredibly great. The graphics, amazing. Although I do think the OG Xbox graphics is a little bit better. But besides that, the PS2 was good on its own. It was backwards compatible with the PS1. Again, tons of great games. You could use your old memory cards. You could use your old original PS1 controller. The PS2 is alright for what it is. On to the next console.
The most powerful game system now has the ultimate holiday offers. Get Tetris Worlds and Star Wars, the Clone Wars, 2 months of Xbox Live and an Xbox for only what? Rated E to T. Xbox. It's good to play together.
The OG Xbox. Now again, this is another underrated system from this generation. To be honest, one of my favorite systems at the moment. Now the OG Xbox was a bit of a powerhouse back in the day. It started online gaming and it was brand new to the gaming scene. Nobody really knew what the Xbox was. Of course, based on research, I wasn't there when the Xbox released. And apparently Microsoft made the Xbox because they thought, video game consoles would overtake PCs, and I guess that's somewhat true. Now, in my opinion, this is my favorite era of the OG Xbox. It is incredibly underrated. Now, me personally, I grew up with the 360 and a little bit of the OG Xbox, but the OG Xbox has a personality to it. Like I said, when you start up the OG Xbox, it's like you're starting up a nuclear reactor, and this console has tons of personality. Like if you thought the GameCube had a personality, this has a lot more packed into it. I mean, just listen to the menu. It's like you're controlling an alien spaceship or something. I love the OG Xbox at the moment. Now, this is going to be a bit controversial to say. I honestly think that the OG Xbox might be better than the PS2. I don't know. Please don't, throw any pitchforks or anything like that. Yeah, I'm sorry, but the OG Xbox graphics just look a little bit better. PS2 graphics kind of look dried out and pale. Plus, one positive thing about the OG Xbox, it came with online. All you had to do was hook up your phone wire and that was it. You had to get an adapter for the PS2. But thinking about it now, all that stuff is kind of useless now since OG Xbox stuff is kind of dead. And anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we're going off the rails here. The OG Xbox is a good system nonetheless. It may be big and bulky, but it has a lot of personality and a lot of great games. Anyway, let's just move on to the Dreamcast, which is going to be very confusing.
This is the day you have trained for, the day you have studied for. Utilize your superior skills, your superior intelligence.
Sit down, rodent!
Oh dear.
Sarah, baby! Oh, you were one.
Don't make me hurt you. Learn to defeat your ruthless enemy, Steve of Hackensack.
Brian, you're gonna get rude.
Shut up, quadruped.
Sega Dreamcast. It's thinking.
Alright, the Dreamcast. So like I said before, I consider the Dreamcast a little bit of both generations. Like, it has the technology of the OG Xbox and the PS2, it just released way too early. Now, I made a whole video about the Dreamcast. If you want to, check it out. Link will be in the description. I kind of go into detail on this, but I like the Dreamcast for what it is. Because like I said, it's a little bit of both. You get a mix of both 5th and 6th generation games, hardware-wise, and it even started online gaming before the OG Xbox. But then again, there was also X-Band. Well, either way, we're going off the rails here. The Dreamcast is a good system. Again, the Dreamcast is an incredibly underrated system. It released at a very weird time. It released in between the generations, I guess. And I feel like this and a few other things led to its downfall. It released at the wrong time. It released sort of in between generations. The Nintendo people were waiting for the GameCube. The OG Xbox people didn't exist yet. The Nintendo people were waiting for the GameCube. And yeah, it was just... I don't know, man. The Dreamcast is weird. But that's all I gotta say on that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I understand this has been a long video. And if you stuck around this far, I would like to give a huge shout out to you. Now, if you like this video... like, subscribe, do whatever you want to do, no rush, and tell me down below what's your favorite console from the 5th or 6th generation. Tell me down in the comments, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.